Welcome to the Comfy Cast, a safe place where we can explore the positive side of mental health. My name's Tans, the editor of Comfy. In this series, we'll be focusing on recovery. We hope these inspiring stories will give you motivation and courage, as well as more insight and understanding to the world of mental health. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Sadia, who's had 2 jobs in the profession of mental health. She worked at Priory Psychiatric Hospital for 3 years and is currently working at Lilius Gillies Supporting Living House. She's here today to give an insight on what life really is like for the mentally ill, as well as her most memorable recovery stories. We hope this episode will be able to motivate and inspire anyone who's struggling, as well as educate you more on the world of mental health. Hi Sadia, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I know you have a really busy schedule.
Hi, it's no problem. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
So, am I right to say you've had 2 jobs within the profession of mental health?
Yes, that's correct. So my first job, I'd worked at Priory Psychiatric Hospital for about 3 years after I'd graduated. And I'm now currently working at Lilius Gillies Supported Living House.
So, is it okay if we start off with your work at the psychiatric hospital?
Yeah, that's fine. What would you like to know?
Firstly, why don't you go ahead and explain the type of roles you had and the key roles within your job?
So at the hospital, I'd worked as a mental health supporter. My shifts would tend to be around 13 or even 14 hours long. A normal shift for me would start off with an observation work. So there are 6 levels of observation, but a normal day would just be the general level, which basically means hourly. For example, once every hour, you check to see where the patient is, how they are, and what they're doing, and also check to see if they're alive and breathing. You basically just have to support them, which could involve going out with them or playing with them. A lot of the time, some patients would be quite aggressive, so one of my roles was to restrain them, which we had got a week's worth of training for. And if patients wanted to leave and go into the community, then we'd support them with that, which would include going shopping with them, taking them for walks. It also included a lot of everyday life stuff, so encouraging them with cooking and cleaning, as well as their education. During the week, we had some patients go to school. We have an education department on site, and this tends to be around 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The department offers the same curriculum as public schools, so the patients get the same standard of education as everyone else. For example, they offer GCSE and A-level subjects along with the qualified teachers. I find that offering this educational system to them gives the patients a structure in their life and doesn't single them out.
Does that mean they'll still be in education even though they're admitted?
Well, some of them are. I find all of them actually should be. We have this category within the hospital which we call YPs, who I worked with mostly. These tend to be young people, and some of them would sleep in till 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Are they allowed to do that?
The thing is, working in a hospital, I should say, we don't actually have the authority to force them to wake up. You know, the patients do everything on their own accord. We actually are just simply here to support them and give them help if it's needed. Even if we bang on their door, or sometimes I would even bounce a yoga ball really hard to see if they would wake up, and they just simply wouldn't. It was probably because some of the patients were highly medicated.
And what do you mean by highly medicated?
This doesn't count for all patients, but a lot of them would be highly dosed on antipsychotic drugs. And this would make their sleeping patterns very irregular. You'd get some patients that would sleep really early and they'd wake up super early. And then you'd get other patients that wouldn't be able to sleep till 5, 6 a.m. So that'll mean they'll wake up late in the afternoon. But majority of the patients would actually go to school.
And what would you say is the hardest thing within the job, or any difficulties that you came across?
I feel like the job itself is hard, But the hardest thing is probably having to restrain the patients. It wasn't something that I enjoyed doing, but it was a major part of the role. Sometimes you'd get patients that would lash out over something very little, like not getting a certain type of orange juice they'd liked, and this would lead them to get restrained. As soon as patients would start showing any aggression, your immediate reaction is to restrain them. It's very difficult. It has to be done purely for their safety and for the safety of other patients around them and the staff. This happens very often, but it's something that you have to get used to. Depending on the patient's condition, a really tiny thing could actually trigger them.
And I know you're not allowed to disclose any information about your patients for confidential reasons, but could you possibly say something about maybe any inspiring stories or patients you had that left an impact on you?
I remember this one girl who was a YP. She had previous placement elsewhere where she had learned a bit of the Bengali language and she was English. She would talk to me in Bengali randomly and we had got on really well. She'd asked me to teach her a few words, including some swear words, and it would always make me laugh. It was a real shock to me that we had bonded over that, and we did end up actually spending a lot of time together on a regular basis, and by the time I'd left the job, she was practically fluent.
So you built relationships with the patients then?
Yeah, I would say it's good to have rapport with your patients, especially just on simple common ground. She would specifically seek me out, and I used our language bond to encourage her to go out and engage with the community. Like, I'd ask her to go see films in Bengali, and this would also help us bond together. There was another girl who I could see was becoming highly elevated. A lot of the times she would self-destruct and do things to herself like headbanging, which I would then use a grinding technique, which is often used within the role, to calm her down. So anything sensory and things she could touch, I noticed when I kept doing this, she would start to improve, and it was nice to see her begin to maintain her own emotions and anger. At the beginning, when she had felt elevated, her initial reaction was to self-harm, but eventually with time, she was able to voice her opinion and just ask for sensory items or essential oils, and this would tend to help her relax and calm her down. It's truly amazing seeing your patients improve, especially because they're so young, so I know they've got their whole lives ahead of them.
So would you say it takes a long time to see improvement, or do you reckon it went up and down a little bit?
I definitely say improvements of patients do fluctuate. I think this happens when there's a certain type of diagnosis. For example, there was this one patient who I'd worked with and he had EUPD, which is emotionally unstable personality disorder. Even with bipolar disorder, they'd all fluctuate with time. But seeing their improvement was a great thing, and overall, I would say there was a lot of positive changes.
And was there anyone who ever got fully recovered or released?
I wouldn't say fully recovered because I find after being released from a psychiatric hospital, you're not cured straight away. I'd say there are still a few stages left to being fully recovered, but there were definitely some people who could control themselves a lot better, control their emotions, their anger. There was this one YP who had left. I remember when he had first joined, he was really aggressive. He would get into fights, make a lot of sexual comments. He was just angry all the time. But towards the end, after he made improvements, he ended up being able to visit home for the weekends and make trips. And this would encourage him not to get involved with anything bad because he wouldn't want to risk not being able to go home and see his family and friends. So what he would do was he'd put his headphones in and he'd just avoid everything and just want to get on with his life. I'd actually once dropped him home and it was really nice to see how quickly he had recovered. I still remember him because he was the same height as me and he would always talk to me. He was only 15, but he'd spoke to me like I was one of his best friends, which made me feel happy because I felt like he had trusted me and he had trusted the institution.
So that must have been a very intense job to have straight after graduation, and especially for 3 years straight. Where are you working now?
It was a very intense job, but I find having that has given me experience within the department. The place that I work now is a supported living house. Once you come out of a hospital, you'll be referred to a house by the NHS. The difference between the house and the hospital is that the hospital is under the Health Act, so it's sectioned, whereas supported living is a semi-independent, so patients can come and go when they like. It is a couple of steps down, as we only have the staff to support the patients. It doesn't include doctors or nurses. Where I work is a therapeutic environment. We tend to use psychological informed environment, which is like community-based kind of therapy approach. A lot of the patients in the supported house living do come from psychiatric hospitals, but a lot of them also come from foster homes. So, for example, when young adults turn 18 and leave foster homes, they tend to come to us for support.
And what kind of roles do you get there?
So in this job role, I'm a recovery practitioner. A lot of this includes organising meetings and events. So every weekdays, I'd set up a morning meeting to catch up with the patients and see how their week have been and how they're feeling, if they've got any problems or any worries, just simply there to support them. We also organise afternoon activity groups. So we'll give them dinner, we'll take them out, go shopping, watch movies together. We do also do one-to-ones once a week, as well as therapy sessions where we get the patients to talk about their past and traumas. As all patients do have traumas, we encourage them to bring this up to the surface and unwind their feelings so they feel that they can talk about it in a safe environment. We find that this is good in the healing process for the patients. A lot of the patients have suffered with self-harming, so we'd also give them verbal support and explain to them that there are other ways to cope with their problems and help with their coping mechanisms. It is a very therapeutic based approach.
Would you say that this job affects your personal life?
100%. I find that I won't leave work until early hours of the morning, past midnight, because I want to make sure the patients are in safe hands, they're happy, they're comfortable. I do often go home and I overwork myself a lot. When I get home, I find that I'm getting their reports done for the next morning. When you're working so personally like this and building relationships, it's very hard to separate your work life from home life.
Is there anything else that you find difficult within the job?
Yeah, I'd probably say when you think one of your patients are doing really well and you're noticing a lot of improvements from them, then they tend to have a fallback. You, as their supporter, you find it really hard to see, but then you just have to remind yourself that it is natural, it's part of the process. There's going to be many patients that have a journey to progress and they're going to have fallbacks, but at one point, eventually they will get there. The difference with working in a supported living house is that you're not trained to restrain them. So we do get some patients that do tend to self-harm, and the only thing we can do is call a paramedic and wait for them to come. Whereas in my other job role, I was trained to restrain them and stop them from harming themselves. But within this job, I simply can't do that because it's not within my role.
I just wanted to touch on this subject quickly due to the current situations. I wanted to know if you saw any differences working during the pandemic and if this affected the house.
I'd say the pandemic itself was very scary. It's not something that any of us had to deal with. So when it came around, all the managers and all the professionals, they were off for a good 3 to 4 months. And that left the house very quiet and empty. There wasn't really any organisation. It was just a bit all over the place. We was kind of left in the dark. The patients probably felt a bit left in the dark. But obviously when COVID had, lessened a bit, and, the restrictions had died down. The management and professionals had returned, and I would like to say it was a little breather, because the patients do see the management as parental figures within the house, so they're more obedient towards them. Especially during the first 3 months, they were restricted to not leave the house. So when management returned, the restrictions eased a little bit. They were able to breathe a bit more and, go out, have a bit more space. There's about 13 patients in the house, and we do have a maximum bed hold of 20. So it did get a bit overwhelming at time. Luckily, they were all fascinated by the fact that I could draw henna, so we did spend most days drawing henna on ourselves. I didn't have to wear PPE around the patients either, because we were within our own support bubble. However, this did mean I couldn't go back to my mum's house or any other household, purely because I was always with my patients.
I can imagine that being really difficult. But just as a final question, is there any advice you would give to a young individual struggling with mental health?
I'd definitely say seek help. I think it's the best thing anyone can do. And from what I've personally seen, it truly does help people and help actually save lives. There's many forums out there on the internet. We've got adverts around shops everywhere that encourages young people to get help. There's helpline charities that are willing to help and support you. They offer, the NHS also offer like a free therapist. They put you on the list. You can talk to your GP. I think it's good to share it with your friends and family. Keeping your emotions to yourself can be quite self-destructive, and that could lead you to a dark place. So I find sharing it with people you're comfortable with, this could be your friends, your family, it would actually truly help you. So I find that you should just focus on yourself, and you should always put yourself first, put your health first, take care of yourself, and just stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and I feel like you've got such an interesting job.
Thank you. I really do enjoy my job. I find that it's nice seeing people make progress in their life, especially when you get patients who are really down, and you get some that don't even want to live and want to end their life. So it's nice to actually be able to help them.
This podcast may have been triggering to some people. If you find yourself in an uncomfortable situation and need someone to talk to, please be sure to seek help. Samaritans is a 24/7 helpline where you'll be able to speak to someone about anything that is upsetting you. You can call them on 116 123 or email them on joe@samaritans.org. If you are in need of urgent help, you can text YM to 85258. All texts are replied by trained volunteers with support from clinical supervisors. If you are a student, you can look on the Nightline website to see if your university or college offers a nighttime listening service. Nightline phone operators are all students too. Please don't be afraid to seek for help, as there'll always be someone available to listen to you. Thank you for listening to the Comfy Cast. Be sure to subscribe to our magazine to read the latest issue of Comfy, where we explore more of the positive side of mental health, focusing on things such as recovery, motivation, and inspiration. Here you will be able to find content that can help change your life for the better. You can also follow us on Instagram under the username Comfy Magazine. We use our platform to spread a positive image of mental health and encourage our readers to interact with each other and create a community. This is also where you can be updated on our latest news and events. You can tag us or use our hashtag #ComfyMagazine to help spread our message. We hope that this episode has helped you on your journey to bettering yourself.